what is happening when we look into the Middle East, and Israel and Iran are at the center of another conflict. We're going to be joined in a short while by Professor Kagwanja, and we'll get some insights into what exactly is happening. But I want to give you an insight into the last couple of days and what has been happening in this area, right? Before Prof gets here, and we'll also be joined for an interesting part, or rather an initiative part of that conversation with Ambassador, His Excellency Oda Joseph, who is the Israeli ambassador to Kenya, and we'll be talking about that. But let's look at a few of those details as we get into things. There was an attack on targets across Iran on Friday by Israel, and they've been followed by 3 days of escalating strikes as both sides threatened more devastation in the biggest ever confrontation between the long-standing enemies. So here's a roundup of the conflict so far. Israel hit more than 100 major targets in Iran Friday, including nuclear facilities and missile sites, and killed senior military commanders and scientists. Satellite imagery showed significant damage to areas of the Natanz nuclear site, Iran's most significant nuclear enrichment facility, but the fuel enrichment plant appeared to be undamaged. A nuclear research center in Isfahan was also hit. Amongst those killed were senior military figures, including the Chief of Staff of Iran's Armed Forces, Major General Mohammad Bagheri. We also see that the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Hussein Salami, as well as at least 6 Iranian nuclear scientists. Israeli strikes continued over the weekend and into Monday as the Israel Defense Forces targeted air defenses around Tehran and claimed they had gained control of the skies over the capital. Israel's military said it had hit more than 80 targets in Tehran since Saturday, including the Defense Ministry headquarters and missile launchers used to strike Israel and defend Iran. The Iranian oil ministry said Israel had targeted 2 fuel depots in the Tehran area. Iran has accused Israel of hitting civilian areas in Tehran, with the health ministry reporting that Israeli strikes had killed 224 people since Friday. Iran has also launched several waves of missiles at Israel since Friday, with Israeli authorities saying on Sunday that 14 people had been killed since Friday and 390 injured. Rescuers and medics said a strike late Saturday destroyed a 3-story building in the town of Tamra, killing 4 women, and 6 people were killed and at least 190 injured at the site of the missile strike in Bat Yam near Tel Aviv. Now, Iran warned the US, the UK and France that their military bases and ships would be targeted if they helped to block the Iranian missile and drone retaliation for Israel's attack. US officials told some media that American air defense systems and a Navy destroyer helped Iran shoot down some incoming ballistic missiles on Friday. So that is what we see happening in terms of the attacks that have taken place so far. We will have, like I said, a conversation with Professor Peter Kagwanja, but we're also joined by Ambassador Lotham, who's on the line with us this morning, and we want to then get a few insights as we go into that. And we're just going to get into that conversation right now. Ambassador, good morning. Hello, Ambassador Lotham, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, certainly better than my family and other Israelis in Israel.
That's to be understood. Of course, we can see what is carried around in the news, and we have a rundown of what has been happening between Israel and Iran. But to then be able to get an overview from you as to what this most recent issue is, and the attacks that we've seen since Friday have been devastating. But what is the current state of affairs, and where did this all escalate from?
Okay, so let me try and sum up a very complicated, not event, it's a very complicated reality that has been going for, 30, 40 years from the 80s, late 80s. This is when, after assuming power, the mullahs in Iran decided to run for a nuclear program. And of course, we remember that in the late 90s, when they built the Bushehr nuclear reactor, supposedly for peaceful purposes, and it so continued. Of course, we remember the 2015 agreement between Iran and the six powers to stop the nuclear program, which they violated, and then 3 years later, the Mossad brought 100,000 documents from Tehran and the surrounding, indicating that Iran is cheating. Now, cheating on what? The plan of Iran is to eliminate, and they call it so very straightforward, to eliminate Israel. The plan to exterminate Israel. So what we are doing now, we are eliminating Iran's plan to exterminate Israel. And Iran's plan to exterminate Israel has 3 components. One is the nuclear one, which we are dealing with now. The second is the rockets. Some of them managed to penetrate our air defense. That's the second component. And the third is terror. As you know, Iran has been supporting terrorist organizations in different parts, from blowing up our embassy in Argentina, other attacks in Europe, of course in the Middle East, but you feel it here. Don't forget, you feel it through Shabab, that's the axis of Iran, Houthis, Shabab, and from here you know exactly what follows. Houthis are being financed $100 million every month by Iran. So what we are doing now, we are taking care of these 3 threats. As I said, the nuclear, you very accurately described most of the targets that we were hitting from the Natanz centrifuge center, and then the conversion center in Isfahan, which turns the gas base back to a nuclear bomb, to a solid material which you can do the nuclear bomb, the rockets. So Iran has been producing rockets to hit Israel, 2,000 kilometers range, but also 4,000 kilometers range that aim to hit Europe. During the initial strike, we took down most of the military leadership in Iran. That was the target, and that's a big, very clear difference between what we do, what we aim at, and what Iranians. Iran aims at our cities. As you said, Tel Aviv, Haifa was hit yesterday, not far from my son's apartment. Surrounding cities around Tel Aviv were hit, so they target cities. We took down most of the military command, almost all the intelligence leadership, almost all the Air Force command, the chief of staff, the head of the rocket ground-to-ground missiles, the ground-to-air missiles, and so on and so forth. And basically we control now the airspace over Iran. Of course, we can do much more. We don't, because we aim at military targets. And as I said, the aim of the strikes, of the operation, is to eliminate Iran's plan to exterminate Israel.
Ambassador, my name is Dennis Okari, and I have a question here. From what I'm hearing, is you're saying Iran is planning to exterminate Israel, and what Israel is doing is stopping them from going forward with that plan. But my question is, if the objective from Israel's standpoint is deterrence, how does escalating strikes, as we have seen currently on Iranian soil, achieve long-term security for your country without risking regional war?
First, our aim is not deterrence. As I said, deterrence comes before you get to action. Deterrence is something that we've been trying in the last 30, 40 years. everybody tried everything, including, of course, the U.S. President in the last, 65 days. And he gave them 60 days to come to an agreement. I remember going back 15, 20 years with this critical dialogue that the European invented and thought that they can negotiate with Iran. The list of attempts is so long and tiring that I will not bother and bore you and your listener. But Iran keeps on cheating because of, very simply, they stated very clearly what the aim is. We don't have to guess. One of the biggest mistakes we did before October the 7th with the Hamas, we thought that what they say, they don't mean what they say. And we learned that we should listen to what people say, especially terror regimes say. So when Khamenei, the spiritual leader of Hamas, of Iran, says the divine promise to eliminate the Zionist entity would be fulfilled, and we will see the day when Palestine will rise from the river to the sea, and that was a quote. So we take it seriously because, there's a ticking clock in the center of Tehran with a countdown, as they see it, to the elimination of Israel. So when you have intentions, one more second, when you have intentions, when you have religious, extremist, radical religious regime, and you have the means, and the means are critical here, the nuclear, we carried out the operation in the last minute before weaponization of the nuclear of the enriched material. So when you have the nuclear, when you have the rockets, when you have the terror, so it's not about deterrence, it's about taking them out.
When you talk about matters to do with the nuclear discussions that are ongoing, the United States of America has been having discussions with Iran with regard to stopping the nuclear program in Iran. Don't you think that the attack by Israel in Iran is making that conversation all difficult?
As I told you, everybody is so tired from these attempts in the last 30 years. You just have to dig a bit into, with the help of Dr. Google, he will help you, I'm sure, to see the long list of negotiations with Iran. And don't forget that only a couple of weeks ago, the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna declared that Iran is hiding their nuclear program. That was almost in a consensus in the IAEA. It was not Israel. We are not members of the board of the IAEA, right? There are many other countries, until last year also Kenya. So they stated it very clearly. President Trump gave them a long and a big credit to try and come to an agreement. But at one point, we keep talking. We've been talking for, as I said, 30 years. And the only thing that happens is that they move from 3% enrichment, or enrich uranium of 3% to 60%. And we are in a point where in weeks they can make a bomb. And that was the time, and that is the time when we have to take action.
Ambassador, let's talk about civilian costs. There are also concerns from both Israel and also in Iran. What real assessments have been done to prevent civilian casualties during these retaliatory strikes? Because you've said your targets are this nuclear program, and you're also looking at military targets. How then do you avoid the civilian cost of all this?
By targeting the military. Exactly as you said, targeting. I can, if you will send me your WhatsApp, your number, I will share with you photos of the apartments where the scientists, where these commanders were staying, and you will see that the apartment was taken down, not the building. And at the same time, I will share with you pictures of buildings in Israel that were completely destroyed. Why? Because the Iranian rockets aimed at the cities, not at an apartment in a building. That's a big difference. And as I said, we fully control the airspace of Iran. Had we wanted to hit civilians, that would have happened long ago. Not only this, we avoid even at this point targeting other targets than military ones. And Iran can supply a very interesting range of infrastructure targets, but we are not there.
Ambassador, I want to thank you for sharing your insights with us this morning, just to get an view of, from your perspective, what actually is happening on this other end, and also to see what happens in the coming days. From all we've heard so far is that there is impending attack from both sides, and that everybody says, well, they're going to continue what they've been doing so far. Israel is not letting up, Iran is not letting up, and it looks like it's going to continue. We're in the studio this morning with Professor Peter Kagwanja as well, who is the CEO of the Africa Policy Institute. Prof, good morning.
Good morning, my sister. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Very sad about Israel-Iran issue.
Yeah.
Like everybody else, yeah.
And just looking at that and putting into perspective, I mean, we can jump right into it because we're in the conversation as well, is that then we look at it from an East African perspective or from an African continentalist perspective, and then ask the question that then looking at the relevance of it as to how it does affect everybody else.
I think first and foremost, we must say that the approach being taken is not the right one, because there's no alternative to multilateral decision making. There's no alternative. Unilateralism, what you call preemptive strikes like this one, and related diplomatic tools that are, military tools that are being taken by any country or any nation is not likely to foster a sustainable peace. And it is the United Nations at its foundation that said that war is in the minds of men. And what that means is that to prevent it, you must sit down and talk. But there is a continuation within the Middle East. And by the way, by all sides, to put themselves in a situation where you feel that you are facing an existential crisis. And therefore, any development is conceived within that range. Obviously, because of the wars in the 1960s and 1970s in the Middle East targeting Israel, Israel itself has been in that state of feeling that it is really being obliterated. There are quite a number of countries. Pakistan has nuclear. North Korea has nuclear. India has nuclear. South Africa had nuclear until 1994 or thereabout, when they were removed. Actually, it was helped by Israel to get nuclear. Israel itself has nuclear. But there's an assumption that within the global community, there are countries that are mature to handle nuclear and others that are immature in handling nuclear. So in this case, Iran can't handle nuclear, Israel can handle nuclear. You can say the same about, China has nuclear, but it is next door to North Korea. China doesn't issue this. So, in other words, this is a very unique situation in the Middle East, which is not about the arms; it's more about the mind. It's about the mindset that they are both operating on, and this is not the first strike Israel is pushing to Iran, and it is not also the first conflict in recent times it's having. It has already done its work. In other words, the strategy of Israel is very clear. There is no Arab nation that must rise beyond its own military capacity. And it doesn't matter what the multilateral system has in terms of, putting, debates or discussions or negotiations. It's all about Israel deciding when it thinks that it is endangered. So it has attacked Syria. Gaddafi is down. Iraqi president, former president is
Saddam
Hussein is gone. Now you're checking. Then you look at where the pieces. I mean, take the UAE, Arab Emirate, it's a friend. Put Saudi Arabia, want to bring it closer using help America. The problem with that regime is that it does not guarantee a sustainable survival of Israel in long term. Because whatever you do, whatever is done in the current world and the level of technology that is rising, one Arab country will get capacity that can destroy Israel. So what is Israel's final result? It is basically to work on the minds of the Arabs, not on the arms. Because now what has happened, if I may conclude this, the cumulative effect of this mindset that we are facing an existential crisis from a specific source has meant that the weak Arab nationalists, when they feel weak, they will cause September 11, that terrorist. They will cause the attack on Nairobi, all the attacks we have had. They will foster Al-Shabaab in Somalia, because you have created a nationalistic movement that we Christians and Judaists want to call terrorists, because that's what we do. Because terrorists a terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. In that kind of mindset, then, what has happened in Iran now, that the preemptive attack by Israel are going to amplify that mindset in the world.
Let's hear from Ambassador Lotum before we go to this break. Ambassador, there always seems to be the call for going towards the tenets of the United Nations, whereby peace first and the absence of conflict is what is encouraged. Also, we've seen from Prime Minister Netanyahu that, Israel is ready to go things alone, almost from an isolationist point of view, if required or if necessary, based off of Prof's sentiments just a few minutes ago. What are your thoughts about, if we need to go it alone, we'll go it alone? Prime Minister Netanyahu, again, has not been shy about those sentiments. Your thoughts?
My thoughts, but before, I want just to comment on my good friend professor's a few words. One, Iranians are not Arabs, but I'm not representing Iran, but still. And if I follow this line of thinking, then if the weaks, as the professor calls them, get the motivation to effect terror and devastation, then what? We should give them more power, so that will make them more peaceful? This is the logic behind? Now, with the international community, as I said, everybody can Google the long, tiring, boring almost list of attempts by everybody, the peace-loving nations. And I can think of a few countries in Africa that were sitting on the board of the IEA that could have taken, maybe they have the power they had the power to convince Iran to make a turn. But at the same time, these countries can't change the mind of terrorist organizations that are around you here in East and West and South Africa. Now, yes, if there is a need to go alone, we go alone. I mean, we were alone, just to remind you, in the Second World War, we were alone. It was another extermination plan that was executed. Why? Because people thought, no, these are only talks. They don't mean it. So, thanks God, we have the means to take out all those who say, but back their sayings by two. So I agree with 50% of what the professor said, that it's the mindset. But when you add to a mindset also the critical weapons that they can use, then that makes it a perfect execution plan, and we are taking it out.
Ambassador, I want to thank you for being on call with us this morning as we continue this conversation. Looking at the Middle East on edge, decoding the Israel-Iran standoff. We did see this that Friday. We saw a series of attacks that took place. Many people killed, scores injured, and then asking the question that in terms of Middle East politics and alignment, Israel is in it again. And this is interesting, Prof, that during, I mean, it's still ongoing, but, you know, at the time where the temperatures were hottest during the Israel-Palestine conflict, that Iran had been stepping on the gas, hadn't they? Slightly. And they said, you know what, there will come a time where we will protect those that we are aligned with, essentially. Is this a manifestation of that almost threat that was given maybe 11 months ago?
Yeah. First and foremost, you know, you can understand where my friend Rotem, Ambassador Rotem, is coming from. Israel itself from the beginning. It's not really, and it's important for you listeners and those watching to know that this is not something that is happening. When you see war, it's a manifestation of long-term war in the mind. And this is not about a century, I mean a decade, it's about a century or more. Culminating in, you know, what happened in Germany and so on. So when you're looking at Iran, don't think about this is something that should have been prevented. There must be a total change of mindset and more confidence in the system that we have. So what does Israel's attack on Iran show us about the world we are living in today? It is telling us that there is no trust. We are, it's what Donald Trump calls America first, meaning it's all about our small nations, wherever they are, that we cannot count on the international system to protect us. And that's why Ambassador Rotem is saying that you go to Dr. Google and look up and see how many times Iran has, you know, promised this and this. But I think the main issue that should come up now is that the larger context of this war between Israel and Iran is basically Palestine. There's nothing else. It's Palestine. What is going on in Palestine, the killing of civilians, and both in Israel by the attackers, and also by Israel itself bombing homesteads or homes of ordinary people in Palestine. That rancor, that anger, that fury that is coming from there is what has made many Arab or Middle East countries that are either Muslim or of Arab orientation to basically begin to come up with rhetoric, the kind that you get from Iran. Because Iran is the strongest military power in the Middle East by virtue of its victory over Iraq. And it's a war. It's really a battle-hardened kind of a country, And so, when Israel targets Iran, this is the final frontier in its war in Middle East. As I said earlier, it has finished Libya, which was a major threat under Muammar Gaddafi. It has done with the Assad regime in Syria. This is the other enemy. It has managed to make peace with the UAE, Arab Emirate, and also make peace with Egypt, another major power, and make peace with Saudi Arabia. Now, Iraq is down completely, and what remains? So this is really the final frontier in Israel's war against its enemies. And this is a continuing war from the 60s, physically, but long before the 60s and when Israel was born. What is the casualty? It is two-state solution to the Middle East crisis. That's the casualty.
Ideologically speaking, there is the aspect that Iran sees itself as the leader of the Islamic resistance against Western imperialism and Zionism, as well as undermining Israel strengthens Iran's position as the leader of the Islamic and Arab world. And if that is the case and all the negotiations that are happening, what exactly does Israel's attack in Iran do to negotiations that are ongoing with regard to even the nuclear program are being stopped by Iran?
Well, that you can call them, dead and buried now, because there's no. I mean, in the first place, there will be no. Iran will have to now reorganize itself after that decapitation attack, because what Israel has done is basically to decapitate Iran by killing almost all its leadership, and I think it's falling short of, taking out the president, Khomeini, and others. From the look of things, it seems to have that capacity. So countries don't attack others without knowing what they're up to. But I think we are living in a world where state is not the only actor. And I think this is what Israel need to learn, that the state is not the only actor. And in a number of cases, the non-state actors have become more important and more powerful than even individual. How was America attacked? America, for the first time, was attacked on the home front. Never mind the Atlantic divide between it and the rest of the world. In one morning, not at night, one morning, as people were going to work on September 11, and thousands and thousands of Americans fell, perhaps more than half in any more recent war. But why did that happen? Because this war has been in the mind of the Arabs. So when the scholar, Samuel Huntington, talked about the crash of civilizations, we are the one who are fueling this crash of civilization, because you are creating the soldiers of tomorrow. So the decapitation of Iran now has created the Taurus of tomorrow. So I think there is no alternative to negotiations in our world today, because the alternative to it would be a world of the mighty, those who have the might dominating, and those who don't have the might basically succumbing. And that humanity has moved almost 2 centuries from that. That was what decolonization was about. That's what creation of Israel was about. The creation of Israel itself was about saying that Germany and all those who think when they are mighty they will operate and others will not. And that's how the world now arrived at the idea that we need, Israel as a nation and as a state, and we need Palestine as a nation and a state. Before 1948, there is no Israel in the map of the world. So that is where we are.
Prof, let's just circle back and bring this home. Where should Kenya align? Because we have relations with both countries. One, or is it a question of it's not our war, why should we care? Two is, why should this concern a Kenyan? So one, where should Kenya align? And two, why should we care here in Kenya?
Now, I have said this again and again, that the safest ship home for Kenya is to stick to our national interests. And our national interests are spread between the two countries, Israel and Iran. And therefore, the only thing we can do as Kenyans is to stick to the principles that govern the world. And the principles that govern the world is that unilateralism, in all its guises and manifestations, cannot be condoned. Two, war is never a solution to any situation anywhere in the world. It might be for the meantime because you are strong, but tomorrow the weak will also become strong. What is your safety? And therefore, as Kenyans, we have no alternative but to just stick to the principles. So if I was in State House now, I would now be looking at all the books that we have agreed upon from the time of the League of Nations to now the United Nations, and what the African Union has decided on this kind of matters, what our negotiations within IGAD and the East African community about these principles governing relations, and then you stick to them without any compromise. Whether they hurt Israel or they hurt Iran, then you stick to the principles. If you go out of that and start listening to your whims and your emotions and the books you read, whether they are the Rig Veda, the Confucian manuscripts, or you're reading the Bible, the Quran, or whatever book you read. Forget about the books you read and the forum you attend to worship your God. Remember, this is a world in which we are living, and where we have all manner of beliefs and ideas, and therefore it is about us as humanity and what principles have we chosen for ourselves to govern ourselves. That's where Kenya should be. Now, obviously, we must, as Kenyans, brace for a very hard times because Iran is one of the major sources of energy, particularly the fuel energy, fossil energy. So that we must brace for, and therefore the market is going to shift a little bit. Now, two, we must brace for the fact that the desperation within the Arab world is going to intensify militarism, particularly what we call terrorism. And the Al-Shabaabs and other forces are going to be emboldened. I can hazard to say new ones are now going to emerge. Because if a country like Iran feel defeated, then it is going to take the guerrilla mode. What does guerrilla mode in this kind of a setting mean? It means more and more terrorism. I don't know whether...
And do you mean terrorism to friendly countries or terrorism?
No, Kenya is a friendly country to Iran. To Iran. It's a friendly country. Kenya is a friendly country to Israel.
Yes.
Therefore, they kind of export their conflict into our neighborhood. That's why the American embassy was attacked in 1998. That is how the Kikambara and other hotels, that's how, Norfolk Hotel were attacked here in Kenya. Until very, very recently, when Al-Shabaab now brought in our localized regional Horn of Africa conflict between us and Somalia. We were not attacked because we were. If you remember the debate, it was about telling the Americans and the Israelis to repair us. Because we are simply collateral damage. That's what we have been. And therefore, we are going to continue to be collateral damage. Why? Because we have attracted a lot of investments that are of Israeli nature. Now we have the French multinationals. Remember, also economy is globalized. And the globalization of the economies mean that Kenya, as one of the favorite destinations of investments, is basically, a soft target.
So what should the approach be?
The approach for us as a government of the Republic of Kenya is essentially to be as, I would say, as beyond reproach as Caesar's wife in regard to sticking to international principles and defending them robustly. We have no alternative. Now, unilateralism, either by Israel or by Iran, is not something that can be condoned. Because if Kenya feels today that we are strong and we send our missile to Djibouti because it is weak, what is the future of peace in the Horn? If that's how we begin to act. Or Ethiopia feels that it has a huge military, therefore it can overwhelm Kenya, and they come coming from the north rolling to the south. What does that mean?
And do you think that's going to happen? Because we have the latest, where there was an expose on Kenya's arms in Sudan war.
Yeah.
We don't seem to be doing so well when it comes to the geopolitics, regionally speaking, how we align ourselves, going back to the books, like you're saying, let's look at our standards, our interests. So if you're looking at the bigger picture here, looking at what's happening between Israel and Iran, let's just draw back to our own continent. Let's look at how our involvement is in the Sudan war, what's happening in the DRC, in line with the current government. Do you see there's a concern there?
That's why I'm saying so strongly that we need to stick to international principles guided by our national interest as Kenyans, not the other way around. because our national interest, interpreted narrowly by our regimes or the rulers that we have, might actually appear, like they are leaning towards one side. But the principles are clear. Now, the threat to Israel is something we are all concerned. And therefore, when Israel says it's threatened, it's something we understand. And we still feel maybe the fear of a nuclear arsenal in Tehran is legitimate for Israel. The question is, to our friends Israel, is unilateralism, preemptive attacks, disregard of existing multilateral systems globally, is that the solution, and is that a sustainable answer to the unsustainability, the uncertainty in the Middle East? Two, when you we get the kind of reports you get from Gaza, from Palestine, and all their cities, and the kind of killings that are coming from the media, and the product that comes from that in terms of the responses of the people, how is Israel working towards its own sustainable future? This is essentially the big question. So as Kenyans, we do understand fully the concerns of Israel. But Israel should be the first country to help foster a strong international system, because it is that international system that got them surviving from Hitler. It is the defeat of Hitler that gave birth to Israel. And it is not the Israelis who defeated Hitler. It is the international community. My answer today to Israel is that from now on, it has to invest in a strong international system that protects the weakest and the most vulnerable, because Israel is vulnerable. It is vulnerable because of the kind of nationalism that has been whipped over the years. Now, Iraq, the Middle East also feels vulnerable because it is abandoned by the major powers, particularly the United States. Rather than protect those principles, the United States have always been seen to align itself with Israel. In fact, that's why Donald Trump looks like now he's an angel, because he's now saying, I'm not going in. You can imagine if Donald Trump started his rhetoric and said that we are now going to wipe out Iraq. Now, the world would be in such a difficult situation. So, in short, Israel needs to invest in the instruments of stabilizing the world.
Now, Prof, the African Union has pronounced itself on the war, especially between Israel and Gaza, and it's put a position of indifference and pushing for multilateralism to take place. But then again, you come back home, and Kenya's position with regard to the Israeli-Gaza war, and Kenya clearly condemned Palestine or Gaza, the Hamas, on that war. But then again, as we have this discussion here, there is the aspect of Israel being supported by other major countries in this war, and how then does that affect Kenya, where we stand with our relations with these other countries that are supporting the war?
No, first and foremost, we must know, and that must be said in black and white here, that what we are experiencing in Iran, what we are experiencing in Israel, is the rule of the extremists. Now, I know my friend Ambassador Rotem will talk about the extremists in Tehran. I think we need to look at the extremists in Israel, because they are the ones who ruled out any option of a negotiated peace, and they started by basically hunting down their own that are for peace. In other words, and now they have decapitated those in Iran, and you don't know whether those below them are the ones who cannot even give in to any idea of sitting around a table. So the point is here, Kenya as a country need to really go back to the drawing board. We have no situation. And then we must state it very, very clearly that we don't seem to be guided by any sense of respect for knowledge about ourselves, about our neighbors, and about the world in decision makings that affect our foreign policy. That's why we find ourselves subjects of headlines, both at home and abroad, that are talking about us as completely derailed. We are not. Nobody is fueling those headlines. It's our action, because Sudan. It is not the first time, for example, we are in Sudan. We were the major brokers of the Sudan peace.
Yes.
And we gave birth to a new republic called the Republic of South Sudan. And that did not affect us, and nobody said that we went wrong. Why? Because we followed the principles of the African Union, IGAD, and we were just facilitators. Therefore, we have become what you would call an anchor state. But now we are moving from an anchor state into what they call a rogue state.
Catalyst state.
No, rogue state. It's not catalyst. No, this is the public perception. Look at all the headlines today about what is happening in Sudan today. Look at what is happening in, for example, Congo and so on. So we are earning ourselves the reputation of a rogue state. And that is not for us, because we are a country that is known to be an honest broker in the region. I think we need to restore that honesty in terms of brokering regional peace. And this applies to the Israeli-Iran. It is moments like this when countries like Kenya stand up. I am not talking about going to the activist way of South Africa, where you sue Israel and do all this. But behind the curtains, you are such a powerful actor that you are respected because of that.
Is there hope for negotiated peace between Israel, Iran, and even Gaza?
There is no alternative. What else? Unless Israel obliterates Iran completely, which it can't. Unless Israel obliterates Gaza and the Palestinians, which it can't. Because if the world was able to, if Hitler and his followers were able to obliterate the Israelis, then they would be long gone. The Russians, particularly the Romanovs, were on the Jews. They tried to obliterate them. We read the scriptures, the Bibles and others. It's all about trying to exterminate Israel. Was Israel destroyed? No. It has come back. So will Iraq be destroyed? Will Iran be destroyed? No. They will all survive. The only alternative we have is to walk back to a multilateral system where we operate on the principle of collective security, not unilateralism and preemptive attacks.
Indeed.
So it's collective security within the multilateral system is the only guarantee, even for China, even for the United States. That's only big and small. It is collective security within a multilateral system. That's the only way to go.
That's the only way to go. And perhaps we'll see that the conversations in the coming weeks, months will head in that direction. And we can't be the proverbial ostrich saying that, well, not my forest, not my monkeys. It's part of the conversations that we must have. And that's why we do them here. Professor Peter Kagwanja is the CEO of the Africa Policy Institute, and previously Ambassador Michael Lotham joined us in this conversation. Thank you for being here this morning, Prof.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.